Hello, thank you so much for joining me today. Today we are going to go over Tremont Youth Collection and Weeding Guidelines. We have a lot of material that we'll cover today regarding how we weed, how we decide to weed, reports that we run, bugs that we could find in books, grubby gardens, and so much more. So let's go ahead and dive in. Up first, we will look at Tremont Youth Weeding Guidelines. Now, each department tries to be consistent with how they're weeding, especially when it comes to youth. So Miller and Lane do look at our guidelines and try to follow the same guidelines as well. However, because we have so many collections and a larger staff, we do have certain criteria and options that maybe some of the smaller branches don't have when it comes to taking care of our collection. So let's dive into our weeding guidelines. Now, I will say I'm not going to read every word or every page that comes with this guideline, so I recommend that you take some time on your own to go ahead and read through this packet. I will be highlighting what I think is vital for you to understand about weeding to get started. So weeding is the continuous process of evaluating a collection and removing materials that no longer meet the needs of the community. Weeding is the process of reviewing books and other library materials and selecting which items stay in the collection and which items are withdrawn and donated or thrown away. So why do we weed? Weeding is a vital part of library services. Each year, at least 500,000 new books are published, with at least 4,000 new books by top publishers specifically for a child audience. Public libraries are, by design and necessity, public interest libraries, not archives. I will say in here that oftentimes I think staff are hesitant to remove a book if we are the only person that owns that book. Again, we are not archives. Chances are if everyone else has read that book, we should probably be doing the same as well. All books are wonderful and we want to offer what's best for our patrons, but we also have to be very select to make sure that we have the top options available for them. So it simply would not be possible for a library to keep every book ever published on its shelves. Weeding allows for libraries to create space for new library items, create space for new library services, play areas, tables, etc. I will say I think this is a little bit challenging for people who've worked in libraries long times, or even some of our patrons that remember what it used to be like years ago. We have to continually evolve and meet the needs of what our patrons are needing from us in the library, so changes are going to take place. We also want to make sure browsing is easier for library patrons, offer a relevant and up-to-date collection, as well as circulate materials that are in good condition. We want to make sure that if somebody is going to our shelves and selecting a book, it is in great condition and we want them to go home with them. I've always been told that when you're evaluating condition, there's two things to think about. First, would you want to take this book into bed with you? I think there's mixed feelings about that in general, but something to keep in mind. Are you comfortable taking this book to your home? Second, how would you feel if your director checked this book out? Would you be proud of this book? Are you happy to hand it to them? Or are you thinking in my mind, oh my goodness, I wish we had weeded that book. It is not in great condition. Weeding often increases our circulation. There's a few reasons for this. First, we look at percentages out. So if your collection is incredibly large, you would have to have a lot more checkouts to see the same numbers as if you had a smaller, dense, tight collection. The other reason would be that you could increase your circulation because patrons understand that the material you have is good quality, so they're interested and more likely to grab items to take home because they're comfortable. Weeding also makes room for layout changes to shelves and floor plans, makes the collection more attractive and enjoyable to browse, makes staff more familiar with their collection because it's hands-on, we're touching it, we know what we have, and it also allows patrons and staff to more quickly find desirable books. Now, there's a few different ways that we can weed. We do follow something called the crew method, and again, that's a bit long. I will give you a copy of that as well, and we'll talk about that a little bit later too, of what that means, how we evaluate books for withdrawal. But there are some ways to weed that we use frequently here. So Tech Services is kind enough. They send reports to our librarians once a month of items that are zero circ, low circ, high circ. So we're already hitting those reports or targets immediately. We are able to run CLC and LEAP reports. We'll talk about those later and what that looks like. You do have the ability to run CLC reports yourself, and so that's a great way to kind of judge your collection and how well it's doing. You can create a list of low circulation or outdated items in LEAP to search for on the shelves or place on hold. So you can do that with your staff card, request any items in that seem like they're older or based on their publishing date for evaluation. Condition weeding, that is the number one way I would say that we are weeding, is going to the stacks, looking at books. If it is not in the condition that we want up to our standards, we go ahead and get rid of it. And then reviewing each item and collection individually. So we'll talk about expectations and how frequently we do that later on. So there are two different styles you can use when actually doing your weeding process. First, I will say in youth, we keep a weeding log. So each staff member is assigned a certain collection area. However, we like to try to help each other out. And so we can go to that weeding log, see areas that might need attention or need support, and help in that regard. So you want to make sure you'll go to our weeding log and document when you weeded, what area you weeded, so that the next person can pick up where you had left off. So the first technique is you go to the stacks, you take a cart with you, you go ahead and pull off all of those items onto a cart, and then you can bring them up to a desk or a computer space and review them that way. If you do it that way, it allows you to look at any of the records when it comes to LEAP, as well as do a physical condition. However, I will say it is more demanding because you're lifting all of those books, having to put everything back as well. The other option is to review per shelf. Now, if you're going to the shelf, this is an option that you can do. You'd go ahead, check condition there, but you'd also want to run some reports on the back end to make sure you're not missing any low circ or high circ items that you wouldn't get necessarily with that check-in, if that makes sense. You're going to review each item for appropriate evaluation, make sure it's in good condition. A list of factors to consider when evaluating a book can be found in the weeding process evaluation section of our document. But factors like this would include condition, number of circs per year, lifetime circs, number of duplicate copies, and publication dates. So what you would do from this point is you would go ahead and select any items that you are wanting to withdraw. You'd put them to the side. And then when you are ready, you can go ahead and check those items into LEAP, withdraw all of them at once, and then we will talk about moving them to a cart in just a moment. So everyone's process and the clicks that they use in LEAP are going to be a little bit different, and that is completely fine. So what you're going to want to do when you want to withdraw those items, you are going to make sure you get yourself to the check-in screen in LEAP. You're going to check in all of those items. If something comes up saying a patron wants to borrow it, you're going to deny it. You're going to check everything in and make sure it's on in status. Once you do that, you're going to select the boxes next to those barcodes. And under action on the right-hand side, you're going to hit Manage Item Records. And from there, one of the drop-down options is going to be to withdraw. You are going to say OK, and then all of those items will be withdrawn. From that point forward, you are going to be able to put those in the back on our cart, and our volunteers will be able to take care of them. So like I was saying, our volunteers are wonderful and typically take care of this for us. There are multiple carts in the back. One cart is items that need to be stamped. So that means that those books have been withdrawn but not touched. We have volunteers that will then go through and use a black marker to block out the barcode. Sometimes they'll also stamp within the book and then put those on the cart that's for withdrawn. And then all of those carts will then go to the friends and they will sell those for us. And then those money all comes back to us, which is wonderful as well. Now, if you have items that are really bad, we can just go ahead and put those in the trash or in recycling. This would be something that maybe a book is completely ripped in half or so damaged beyond repair that nobody would be interested in purchasing it. We do have an option for that as well. If you have large amounts, you can go ahead and put in a facilities ticket for that. Otherwise, you can throw those in the trash or the recycling. Okay, so the weeding criteria that we follow is a crew method, and it's called the musty weeding criteria or technique. And this allows us to judge if a book should go or not. I will say, I think people have a bit of a struggle sometimes. It seems like it's challenging to get rid of books. It seems like it's wasteful. You do need to understand that's part of the process in libraries. And like I said, our goal is to get those books in other people's hands as well. So even if we are not keeping those, we are trying to sell those as part of our donation to the Friends. So it will be put to good use. So I think people sometimes struggle. Also, there is an emotional attachment. I know people sometimes have a certain book or title that reminds them of childhood or something that they love to read. And they're like, well, maybe we'll just keep that a little bit longer. So the goal of this is this gives you the criteria. You need to follow it. It is completely logical steps. I understand the emotions not involved, but this is what we do to evaluate if an item should stay or not. So first, we have M, misleading and or factually incorrect. While they're most often applied to nonfiction, it could also apply to stereotypes you find in fiction books. So we're always looking for something that is factually incorrect and getting rid of those information. Top of mind, what comes to me is with Indigenous people. So during COVID times, there was a big push of we do not have correct information about this demographic. We went ahead and got rid of materials as all libraries did. I do think the struggle is the publishing world is still working to create those books about Indigenous people that are factual and that align with what's true of them without stereotyping. But we went ahead and pulled those because we knew that what we had to offer was incorrect and harmful. So we got rid of those. U is ugly, so worn, drab, water damage, or otherwise falling apart. If something is bent, beat up, and falling apart, weed it even if it can't be replaced. So it's just time to go. It looks that bad. We don't want to have that on our shelves. S is superseded. So superseded is by a new edition or a better looking book on the same subject. This also applies to nonfiction. So our example on here is the Guinness World Records. So when the newest edition comes out, we go ahead and get rid of that old edition because we want the newest, most factual information. We don't need to keep 10 years worth of Guinness World Records. We just need the newest one on our shelves. T is trivial. Of no discernible literacy or scientific merit. Be careful with this one. Just because you might not personally find a title to be high literacy doesn't mean a third grader doesn't feel the same way. So we want to make sure that this is helpful and interesting to others as well. I is irrelevant. So irrelevant to the needs and interests of the community, often shown through circulation numbers. So this one I will say there is a bit of caveat to me. We want to have a collection that is diverse, and sometimes books that we have that represent the diversity do not go out as much as a typical, let's say, Pete the Cat book. So we do want to make sure that we are keeping enough items in our collection that represent the diversity, but we do not have to keep everything in the collection. However, in most topics, if the community is not interested, we're going to see that through the numbers. They speak for themselves when it comes to those reports. So if the reports are showing to you that maybe gardening isn't of interest or specific, home gardening, that would be something that we would get rid of because our community is telling us that they're not interested in that. And then we will have that information when it comes to purchasing in the future. And then E is elsewhere. Material is often obtainable at other libraries through ebook services and through other means. Most classic titles are available for free online in their entirety. At the same time, being the only library that owns something should not be the only reason to keep a particular book. So again, even if another library, like in our consortium, has books, we don't often need to have it ourselves. That's the reason we have the consortium. We can share with different partners. We don't have to own it or have it at our fingertips. As long as we can get it for our patrons, that's what's important. But we shouldn't keep a book just in the attempts or hopes that a patron might want it at some point. So we can go ahead and get rid of that for the time being as well. So this is probably my favorite section. I will say weeding is a spectrum. I personally am a heavy weeder, so I fall on that end of just get rid of it. I know some of our staff fall on the other end. So you kind of have to judge yourself and know where you are to make sure that we are being consistent. But having this description, I think, really helps us to stay in sync with each other and make sure our collection is cohesive, and what we're weeding is cohesive as well. So if an item is falling apart or looks unappealing, withdraw that item, regardless of how many times it has been checked out or its ability to be replaced. We are not keeping it. Even if it's a new book, it's gone out one time, we are not keeping it just because it's new, if it is not in great condition. So poor condition includes grubby covers with stains. So try wiping with a wipe. Again, I'm not envisioning you're sitting there scrubbing and scrubbing a book for an hour. If it is that much work, it just needs to go. It's a quick wipe down. If that works, beautiful. We can put it back on the shelves. Otherwise, it's time to go. If we have a grubby cover with any type of bite marks, especially our board books, that happens frequently, rips, folds, or peeling edges, we want to get rid of those. So just go ahead, and we don't want somebody to get a book with a bite mark in it. That's very unappealing. Damage and ripped spines over 1/2 inch. So especially if you think about our picture books, we know little fingers like to try to pull at those spines to get a book out, especially if there's a lot of books on the shelves, which is why shifting is important. That spine can start to tear. So we are going through and getting rid of those books. We want it absolutely less than 1 inch. If it's over that, we should get rid of it. If it's less than 1 inch, it doesn't mean that we have to keep it either. That's just kind of our jumping off point is 1/2 inch. Anything more than that absolutely needs to go. Torn, missing, or taped together pages, you will know soon. For me, I cannot stand tape in a book. It doesn't look great. It doesn't hold up well either. If a book tears, that happens at times. We are just going to get rid of that book. I know patrons sometimes have mixed feelings about that, or they'll ask us for tape so that they can fix the page themselves. Again, we don't need to make a big deal about it. If they tape it, we're just going to put it to the side and withdraw it at a later point. But again, it doesn't hold up well, and it's not a good look, and we should get rid of that. Broken binding, so the spine's disconnected or split from pages. Once you see it, it's like the spine gets wiggly and it's detached from the pages, and there's concern those pages are going to fall out. Any type of writing inside the item, if it can't be erased, sometimes you'll see kids underline or star or do different marks in it. If it's like a page or two or a name in there and you can erase it, that's great. If it's an entire book, go ahead and just withdraw that as well. Strong odors. Now, I will say customer service has a stinky bin, they call it. So you can always give it to them. They have in there some techniques of how they try to get rid of items. I think they'll do up to a month to see if it gets rid of it. And that's typically, it's like food smells, cigarettes, things like that. We can try that. If that doesn't work, we can go ahead and get rid of it as well. Nobody wants to take home a stinky book. And then water damage. So a book has either been dropped in the rain or spilt on. Anything like that can very easily mold. So again, even if it's new, even if it's like, it seems like a small amount, it will cause more problems to keep it than it will just to get rid of it. And then next is bugs. We're going to talk about this a little later in the presentation. We do have a policy on how to treat bugs, especially when it comes to bed bugs. It is something that all libraries experience, so I don't want you to be shocked about that, but it is, not ideal, and we talk through what that process will look like. So again, any items with water damage or dry liquid stains should be immediately thrown away due to the mold and concern about that. We'll talk about this again, but anything with bugs, you don't have to be a bug expert. If you see a bug on it, just go ahead, put it in a Ziploc bag, seal it up. We give that to customer service. They work with facilities to see what kind of bug it is, and then there's a whole process we will go through on treating depending on what that bug is. So having that bug is also important because it helps us to know what type of bug it is. So our goal at UAPL for all departments is that each item is circulating an average of 4 times per year, unless you have a special consideration highlighted in that particular section below. That could be something with research where obviously they have materials that they're keeping because of that research aspect, but typically in youth, everything is going to fall along those guidelines. Books that have circulated over 80 times in youth and 60 times in teens should be heavily considered for withdrawal or replacement, meaning they've had a lot of use. That typically tells you how long they hold up for as a max high circ. So we'd want to evaluate those. Any items with CDs, anything that is audio-visual, so that could also be our picture books with audio, our DVDs, our Blu-rays. If those have circulated 100 times or more, those should be withdrawn as well. Items are typically not replaced unless very high demand titles. And even when we are making suggestions, we're doing more themes. So we say we would like Paw Patrol versus a specific Paw Patrol movie or episode because those have so much turnover as well. So to determine how often an item has circulated, there's a few different options. In LEAP, you would go in. One of the options is the source and donor tab. That tells you the year an item became available to check out at the first available date. So first available date and publication date can be different. First available date is when we received that item and we were able to check it out at the library. You'd subtract that from the current year to determine how long the library has owned that particular item. So the book could have been published, 5 years before, but we received maybe a new copy or a new edition, and it could be 5 years from that date. So you want to evaluate that publication date versus that first available date as well. Under the statistics tab, it'll tell you lifetime circs. So in there, you'd be able to do some math and divide out if it's circulated on average 4 times or more per year. And then how many times an item has circulated during the current year and the previous year. Because if you do that math, you might get the correct number. A book might have circulated 4 times per year, but that could have been, 5 years ago, and that book is no longer circulating. So you want to make sure that you're also looking at current year and the previous year as well. So the history tab in LEAP also shows you the last few years of an item's life. So it can be really interesting. If you think about it, we allow 10 renewals per patron. So you'd be able to have a book for up to 10 times, which could be 10 months. So oftentimes you're like, wow, this book is really circulating. You go and look at the history, that same patron has had that book for 2 years. So it's really not circulating at the rate that you think it is as well. So pay attention to that history tab. It will give you some key items and secrets there too. When an item is on the cusp of being kept or withdrawn, or when you're weeding to increase shelf space, look at the history tab. Helps you determine how popular it truly is. Keep in mind that LEAP counts automatic renewals as circulations, like I was saying. Also, if you are debating, ask a coworker, right? So again, I know that I weed heavily, so I might ask somebody who I know is a little bit more lenient than me. Same thing, vice versa. Check with your colleague and they can help coach you or help you think about whether a book is worth keeping or whether it's time for it to be withdrawn. Okay, so next we'll talk about duplicates. We should not have excessive duplicates on our shelves. I would say the most we would have would be 3 at a time. If we have over 3, we definitely want to evaluate them. Even at 3, we'd evaluate them to see which ones are in the best condition and get rid of ones that are not. We want them all to be consistent and look the same. So you would evaluate those. Again, if you have more than 3, typically what that means, because Miller Park is so small, when items are weeded there due to space, they will come to the youth department at Tremont. So sometimes we'll have this surplus. And again, we want our condition to be tight and look well, so we want to make sure everything looks in the best condition that it can. But we also don't have that shelf space to house that many books. So we will be evaluating those. Typically, you would see this, or I have seen this in nonfiction. It does happen sometimes in picture books and other sections. So pay attention to those. And then you can always check and LEAP too. You can make them withdraw in there. You can check to see if other duplicates are missing. Really get a experience of what is happening with the collection, and move forward with duplicates from there. Okay, publication date. You have two extremes. So the one extreme is items are severely old. I will say I asked tech services at times to run reports to see what our oldest item is. When you have a book that is 15 plus years old, especially if it's nonfiction, that is going to be a problem. There is going to be information in there that is not correct and accurate. We want to make sure that we are a resource to our community members and that we are good stewards to our agreement with our CLC partners, that the material we are giving them is in good condition and accurate, reliable information. So what that means is that if the publication date is too old, we need to go ahead and get rid of that book. If you are looking at the guideline packet, in there you will see for nonfiction specific years of what is acceptable for a nonfiction book to be kept or maintained within our collection. There is a range, and the reason for that is if you think about a poetry book, that could be still relevant from the past 10 years, way more relevant than it could be for something like social sciences, healthcare, something like that, because discoveries are made all of the time, and so things are changing. So we want to make sure the information we're having is kept up to date. On the other extreme of that is going to be the life cycle that we give a book. So typically we give up books at least 2 years to see how they're doing. We might sometimes face issues with that when it comes to space. So that is a discussion, but the general rule of thumb is going to be 2 years. Now, if an item is in poor condition, or let's say it's part of a series and that book is, a year old, but it's part of 9 book series and none of them are moving, it's acceptable to then get rid of those items. Otherwise, we're going to give it a chance, give it a full 2-year cycle and see how it does. So like I said, this was a quick overview over the Tremont Youth Weeding Guidelines. I ask that you still look over the packet, make sure you have it, use it as you are weeding, refer back to it. Also work with your colleagues and ask for their input. Weeding is incredibly important. Our collection matters greatly to our patrons and to us. It's a reflection of us. And like I said, we want to be good stewards to the CLC as well. So please make sure that you are up to date on this and are comfortable weeding. And we will talk next about bed bugs. So bed bugs are probably everyone's least favorite topic. However, it's important that you are informed and you understand how to respond in the event that you do find bed bugs. Now, I will say there are other bugs that can appear in books, so don't think it's just bed bugs. But I want to go over indications that there is bugs in books, what that looks like, and then later on we can determine what it is. Obviously, bed bugs are severe. We know that they're incredibly challenging to get rid of, so I think we go to the extremes immediately. We don't want to find any bugs in books, but that's why we're focusing specifically on bed bugs. Now, let me say, bugs do not gravitate towards books, right? They're typically looking for food or shelter. If they are gravitating towards a book, it means that there is an infestation. That is kind of the last place to go when there's nowhere else to go. The picture on the left is an image of what bed bugs look like in a book. I tell staff this all the time. It literally looks like a kid took a pencil or a pen and jabbed it into the book. I will say this book is incredibly severe. Oftentimes you'll see it in the spine area. So if you pick up a book in the spine and it looks like somebody was poking it with a pen, use caution. We'll go over the policy in a minute and what you should do in that event. But I know that happened to me one day when I was in the stacks. I picked up a book and I saw it and I was like, there is a bug in this book. I went to a surface so I could make sure nothing fell out of it. It's not contaminating anything else. I opened it up and it was ants. So again, not always bed bugs. We don't want any bugs in the books, but it does occur. The picture on the right is going to be what a bed bug looks like after it has eaten. So when they are young, when they have not had feast on you. They're often white or clear, kind of like a yellowish color, and you'll see that more in the handout I provide you. But this is what they look like once they have eaten. They get darker in color, and then they obviously grow within size as well. I am going to read through our policy so you understand what it says and the appropriate steps to take. Whether you're a staff member or manager, I want you to understand the full process because we take this so severely. So adult bedbugs are light brown or reddish color, oval, 6 legs, and have no hind wings. Front wings are pad-like structures. Bedbugs have segment abdomens with microscopic hairs that give them a blanded appearance. Adults grow 4 to 5 millimeters in length and are about 1.5 millimeters wide. Some have comparable sizes and shapes of that to an apple seed. This is what they look like. Again, if they are young, if they have not fed, they will look yellowish, clearish, and be much smaller. I will say too, you can also find the eggs in books at times. So again, those little dots, you can open it up and see like almost an egg sac versus an actual bug as well. Staff, this is what you need to do. Do not move any item you suspect to have bed bugs. Bag any item with bed bugs immediately. There is Ziploc bags at each circulation desk for use of this purpose. Now, we also have them in the youth area where our office supplies are too. So you will take any item you can. Doesn't matter if it's individual, separate, stick them in the bag. The goal is that you are zipping the bag, so keeping anything in the bag. It's also helpful if we can see the barcode. That allows us to tell who the last patron was and any record of that book, especially because there's a high chance we might need to withdraw that book as well. So try to make sure the barcodes are facing out. If you're putting multiple books in there, they'd want to be varying heights so that we can see what those barcodes are. Well, I will say this too. If there's a bug, and let's say you want to go to a surface where you can make sure that if you open that book, you can see any bugs or anything that would happen on that surface if something were to fall out. If a bug falls out, the very best thing you can do is use book tape, stick the bug to it, and put it in that bag. The reason is we then give those to the exterminator, and that helps them determine what the book is and how to do treatment. And then it prevents that bug from moving along or, infesting another area as well. If you find any bugs in books, you need to then take those items immediately to me, your manager. And if I am not here, you're going to want to go to customer service and speak with one of the circ leads there. Now, the library does not accept any bag donations from patrons, and bed bugs can be carried into the building this way. So they ask that books are individually set in for donations. So next we'll talk about what a manager would do, because I want you to understand the steps and feel comfortable. So if possible, again, we would try to get a sample of that insect and either have it in the bag or on a piece of tape in a bag that we could show to facilities manager. If it is multiple items will be bagged and then clearly marked in a plastic bin. We want to make sure that nobody is opening these items or questioning what these items are. Facilities manager will then contact our contracted pest control provider. They will determine what the insect is and then next steps to move forward with treatment. If the items are infested with bed bugs, the bagged items will be or must be discarded at an outside dumpster. So we wouldn't throw them just in our trash cans. We would take them out to the dumpster. The manager will determine whether to charge the patron for the items. This is typically determined based on if this is a multiple offense. So there is items kept, and I will say there are patrons that are contacted that are in shock and had no awareness that this happened. And then there are patrons where, they know that there is a problem, and there is times where that patron may be told they cannot return to the library until there is proof that their home has been treated, just to ensure that material and patrons at the library are safe from borrowing items. We would print out any item information for the material that's being discarded, and then we would follow up with an incident report to document it. Managers or admin would contact that patron by phone as soon as possible to let them know. We would speak with the patron. Obviously, we want to be discreet, have good judgment. Like I said, it could be a total fluke and they are as shocked as you are, or it could be they're aware. So there's varying levels as well. A few additional comments that I wanted to make about bugs before we move forward. First, we have had incidences where bed bugs have been found in the book drop. I will say there's good and bed news, right? Everyone is upset when it occurs. The good news is that staff are finding them. So that means that the training is going well. They know how to handle. They are protecting us, which is completely lovely. So just know that there is a process in place. There have been bugs found, so I don't want you to think it can't happen. Our books travel all over Columbus, as long as other materials. And there's certain items such as DVDs where bed bugs are more likely to gravitate towards because they're dark in nature and they can hide in there. But just be mindful when handling materials that it does occur. The second thing I want to tell you is that because items in the book drop could have bed bugs or have had bed bugs in the past, there is a bed bug oven that was purchased. So what that means is it's incredibly large. An entire bin of books from the book drop could go in it. So if there's any question, they will put the bin in. The oven heats to a temperature high enough that the bed bugs don't make it. And then they will evaluate the items from there on how to proceed forward. And then the third thing I wanted to mention was that we do have a bed bug dog that comes in. It comes in periodically. I think it's every 6 months or less. However, anytime there is a concern or incident, we bring that dog in to do a smell, especially afterwards, to make sure that everything has been treated. So we take this matter very seriously and we do everything we can to prevent problems. I think we have a really good plan. And I'm hoping that you, are not thrilled to be learning about this. You're feeling more comfortable knowing that if it does occur, it's treated immediately and the risks are incredibly low. So up next in youth, we will talk about the assigned collection areas. Everyone in our department has an area that they're responsible for, and depending on work schedules and position, that will vary. But everyone is responsible for the collection and making sure it's in great condition. So on the screen, you will see all of the assignments that are available. And I typically work on assigning these depending on how staff feel, how comfortable they are when it comes to collection, as well as their hours and how much time they'd actually have to work on something or devote to something. There's a lot more fiction than nonfiction, as you can see as well. So we divide it up based on what each of our collections are and then how it works for staff. So some things to keep in mind when it comes to what responsibilities look like. So we weed as needed. It's a constant thing we are working on. If there's any downtime, that is something that we gravitate towards. The goal is twice a year. I will say that that is lofty, especially depending on the size of collections. So you'll see on here, board books we try to do quarterly. You think those are for littles, they end up in mouth, they have teeth marks, things like that. There are larger collections like picture books. It's very challenging to get through those when you think of the size of that compared to the board book collection. So again, the goal is twice a year. We're continually doing it, but at least once a year it should be occurring. So we make recommendations for collections. So that could be monthly. You could either make that to myself or to tech services directly. Again, that could be specific titles that you have in mind, gaps that you see in the collection, generalization. So like we need more Disney Frozen books, etc. Shifting, our goal is weekly. So we're assessing our collection. Shifting can be a lot. It can be very time consuming as well. So my goal is whatever your collection area is, you're doing a walkthrough at least weekly just to see how it's looking, put any face outs up, just assessing where it's at. It doesn't mean that you're in the collection, you have an hour devoted to it or multiple hours depending on your schedule. but you're at least aware of the status and if there's any overcrowding or small changes and improvements that you can make. And then the last is shift reading, and this is when time allowed. So this is bottom of the priority list, I would say. So shift reading would be checking to make sure that the books are in order. So they're in alphabetical order by author when it comes to fiction, and then they're in Dewey Decimal order when it comes to nonfiction. The requirements are all full-time staff are assigned one large collection area, and those are highlighted in the green. The reason it's full-time staff is they have more time to devote to it, so they have a heavier assignment or expectation of them. And then all part-time staff have a smaller collection area that they work on so that it's not as labor intensive or overwhelming, but it's still, you're an important team member and we need your help to make sure the condition looks well. And each staff member does not have time to do all of this on their own, so we need to rely on each other to make sure that the collection is in a cohesive, great condition when it comes to our patrons. Next up, we are going to discuss running reports, and there's a few options for these when it comes to high circ, low circ, as well as heat maps as well. So on the screen, you will see what our collection targets are for youth. So Tremont youth is in green. So I'm going to explain to you what this means. So youth fiction and nonfiction, our goal is when we're running those reports, so zero circ, meaning the item has not circulated in 2 years, that would mean zero circ. And any high circ would be if the item's gone out 80 times or more. For YA fiction and nonfiction, so that's teen, that would be if an item does not circ in 18 months, we would get rid of that item. And if it has circed over 60 times, we would evaluate that item. And then for youth YA non-books, so this would be our audio, DVDs, this could be our picture books on audio, CDs, that would be anything that has zero circs in 2 years, and any high circs is 100 plus. So when it comes to zero circ, if an item has not circulated for 2 years or more, we are immediately getting rid of those items. Those items are considered dead. So you would go ahead and proceed with withdrawing those items. However, when it comes to high circ, we know that that item is obviously of interest. People are checking it out a ton. So those are not automatic withdraws. Instead, what we would do is we would pull those items, evaluate them, check the condition, determine if it can go back on the shelves, if we want to order a new copy because it's so popular, or if it's just time to be withdrawn as well. So high circs, you are going to evaluate. Zero circs, we can withdraw immediately. Now, I will say this too with a caveat, because you want to make sure that we are not getting rid of materials that are demonstrating diversity in our collection. So if you are going through books and you have a ton of zero circ items and they're all about Black history, you're still going to want to make sure you're preserving and having a healthy Black history collection, but you would not keep all of those books. If you have further questions, please let me know, or a full-time staff member, and we are happy to walk you through it. On the screen, and I will also provide you with a handout. These are running reports for zero circ and high circ, as well as heat maps. So a heat map is really interesting. It is basically a screenshot or a moment in time of what your collection looks like. So if you run that report, you will see different colors, and the hotter the map is, meaning the more popular that item is. So you want it to be warm, right? Like you want it to be like a bright red color because that means there's interest there. You are able to print those reports and save those and run them from time to time. Our goal is that colors are improving. No offense to juvenile nonfiction, that collection is never going to be as popular as like juvenile graphic novels. It's just not. You have certain things that are smaller, tighter collections that kids gravitate towards more. The goal is that you are improving your collection, so checkouts are increasing, but not every collection is going to be a hot color, if that makes sense. and then running the zero circ and high circ reports in the CLC report. So our tech services team does run zero circ and high circ for us in LEAP. I want to clarify what the difference is compared to the CLC reports. If you are running reports in LEAP, those are going to give you results anytime a book is checked in-house. So at the end of the night, we check books in-house, meaning it was pulled off the shelf, a patron was interested in it, but they did not check it out. So those LEAP reports signal, oh, this book is still of interest. It counts as quote unquote a checkout, even though it's not an official checkout. If you run the CLC reports for high circ and zero circ, it is not going to do those in-house check-ins. So if you look at the tech services report, there might be no items on zero circ. And then if we run it for CLC, you might have 20 items because those items were only being checked for in-house status. I would say, both are tools, not, one is not better than the other. I think just having that in mind and knowing why you might seeing those varied results. But staff members are welcome and encouraged to run those reports themselves through the CLC. That's why you have those handouts. And it gives you some perspective on your collection of what is popular, what's not popular, what we might need to replace as well. So really, it's a tool for you. And if you have any questions, please let me know. We're happy to answer those for you. Up next is going to be your homework assignment, which is called our Grubby Garden. So this is something that I created to, again, work on that consistency of how we are evaluating items and if they should be kept or not kept. So I have a collection of books and I have gone through them and marked on them on the inside back cover with a Post-it note of whether I would keep that item or not and why. So what I would like you to do is to look at the items, think if you would keep it or not, and then flip to that sticky note and see what I have wrote and evaluate if you agree with me or not. And I think that gets you thinking about what condition looks like and what should be kept or what is time to be it's for an item to be withdrawn as well. Along with flipping through actual physical material, there's also a Grubby Garden handout that you will receive as well. And that will, again, reiterate some of the things that we discussed today and help to coach you on making decisions when it comes to items that we need to keep or withdraw and next steps. Thank you so much for watching our training about collection and weeding. It's a lot of information to take in, and weeding takes practice so that you are feeling comfortable and confident with making these decisions. I will be providing you with a stack of handouts to look through as well, and I will be assigning you a collection area that you will then be responsible for, and we will talk through what next steps for that collection area looks like as well. So read through the packets, look through the Grubby Garden, think of any questions that you might have, and then I look forward to following up with you about next steps. Thank you so much. Bye.